Hello everyone and welcome to another video. My name is Geronimo and in my channel and in this video right now I'm talking about how you can be progressively learning languages a little bit more faster or more effectively. Let's get into it. The first tip is something in a broader spectrum, but it's something that a lot of people miss, and it's in making the material matter. Making sure that it's on a topic that you're genuinely interested in, because then you're going to pay more attention when you're hearing it, you're going to understand it more when you're learning it, and ultimately you're going to be able to retain more information and able to use it in contexts that you'll actually enjoy talking about. There's no point learning about farm animals if you never talk about farm animals. The reason why I'm saying make the material matter first to begin with is because when you look at different learning institutions and applications that are built specifically to teach you languages, because they're trying to cater to the wider audience, their materials are erratic and they're talking about first introductions, then about foods, and then farmyard animals. Half of the information is completely irrelevant to most of the people that are learning it. So first, make sure the material matters to you in context that you will like and you will actually use in the future. One word: autodidact. An autodidact is a person that is able to teach themselves, and in this day and age with the abundance of information, there is no excuse for waiting for an institution or an application to hold your hand in learning other languages. You've got an abundance of information available to you when you want at a click of a button, and you should be actively making your own lesson plans to cater to your specific needs. And also this helps you to think about learning more procedurally as a process that you can go through. If you look at polyglots, which is a name for a person that speaks 3 or more languages, they actually construct their own lesson plans in unique ways that are specific to them. So making the material matter for you and avoiding all the institutional lesson plans, you could look at them for a base, but then I would redevelop them to your specific needs. Are you going to be traveling? Are you going to be socializing within bars? Are you going to be talking about this, that, or the other? Because this is going to affect the types of things that you will be learning about. And for number 2 is making feedback loops in the form of tests to gauge how fast you're learning. If you have too much that you're trying to learn at once, you could become overwhelmed and then give up. If you have too little, you get bored. So what you could do is you could do daily and weekly tests to gauge how fast you're learning. Are you learning 5 phrases a day, or are you learning 50? Because this could determine how much interest that you have on learning over a long period of time. And also it gives you an opportunity to recall the information to see actually if you remember. If you've been made aware that at some point you're going to have to try and actively recall what you've been learning, like as a test or something like this, you can actually pay more attention in that moment out of fear that you're going to forget. So it's going to help you pay more attention in the moment. It's like, this is something to remember. So having small little tests is a good way of measuring your progress, and also a reminder that it's important and trying to remember it. Also, with spaced repetition learning, it gives you another element of repetition where you can actively, consciously think about what you've been studying. The number 3 is context dependent memory, which is the idea that your memories are actually connected to the context that you've been learning it. So try and get as close to the contextual environment, the real world scenario that you'll be using the information. If you plan to be traveling, then start traveling. If you plan to be using it in bars, well, go to bars to practice, because then your environment is going to help trigger the similar memories that you've been developing in the past. If you learn in a swimming pool the language, when you go to another location it can be a tiny bit more difficult to remember than if not. One idea that I thought of because of context dependent memory is when you're learning phrases, you put them in sentences, because then you've got the context that it will be used within. But then also an idea would be to try and make a contextual web of association. So if you had a specific type of word like can, you could try and establish all the different scenarios that you might use the word can like as in a can, physical can. And then what you can do is if you build phrases up with that, you're going to give yourself all the different elements of different contextual environments where you could be possibly needing to recall that information. And I think this will strengthen the synaptic nerves and give you more routes of access to access the informations. So for number 4 is in developing open-ended questions. Priority phrases to put you in a position of continuous learning through asking the right questions to continuously receive information from others. In comparison, a lot of learning institutions and applications will help you to state information and give other people information. My name is this, I like cats and dogs, I live here. Things like this is kind of irrelevant, I would say. And the more relevant things would be how to say this. Can you speak slowly? Is that correct? How do you say this? Please explain some more. These are open-ended questions for other people to give you more information that you can receive, rather than you transmitting information for other people to receive. So, developing open-ended questions. I've got some links in the description. My high priority phrases that will put you in a position of receiving more information from whoever you're speaking to without needing to resort back to your native language. Please support me by simply pressing the like and subscribe button and leaving a comment of how you're finding my channel so far, so I know what to change in the future if anything. Take care. So for number 5, it is in forgetting grammar entirely and focusing mainly on the spoken language. And this is because it takes up a higher percentage of communication as a whole. Arguably, you could say forget learning languages entirely and actually just only focus on non-verbal communication as a whole. Non-verbal communication takes up over 93%. Only 7% of language or communication is what you say, which is arguably all the languages that you're learning about. 23% of it would be how you're speaking, and then the remainder of like 73% is in non-verbal communication of your gestures, proxymetrics, your distance between someone, eye gazing, and things like this. Appearances, the meaning, the semantic meaning of different, all the gestures and the context in which it applies. All these are arguably a lot more important than the spoken language, or even more importantly, the grammar. So for number 5, it's forget grammar entirely and use the spoken language. If you want to look into it in more depth, you forget the spoken language and go straight into non-verbal communication and the meanings of different elements of the wider spectrum of universal language as a whole. Number 7, it is in high frequency words and verbs. There's a hypothesis that with 2,000 of the best selected words, you are able to communicate with about 80 to 90% proficiency. To get it to 100% would take 10,000, which is 5 times. And this could follow the Pareto's 80-20 principle. What is the 20% of useful words that will give me 80% of the overall language? If you can focus on the high frequency words and verbs first, then you're going to effectively learn more important words and being able to communicate in a faster manner. There is a link in the description. So for number 8, it is in cognate words. And cognate words is 2 words that are spelt the exact same, but they're spoken differently in different languages. And cognates is important because then you can get a vocabulary of different words that you didn't know that you already know. For instance, in a Latin rooted language like Spanish, you've got alcohol, but in English it's alcohol, but it's spelled exactly the same in both languages. I was speaking to people previously and they had me believe that it is because there was a bleed in languages throughout history when you have invading neighboring countries, and then where they're trying to integrate with one another, and maybe they both seen words written down, but the pronunciation was different between them, and it's infused within languages throughout time, and then that's what we've got known to today as cognate words. Also a link in the description. And so for number 9, it is in Pictographic Association or Dual Coding. This is a type of mnemonic, which is a way of encoding information. Pictographic Association would be when you find out phrases that you want to try and memorize, you dual encode it, you find two sources of ways of encoding the memory into your brain. The right hemisphere you're going to be focusing on with the pictures, and the left hemisphere is going to be with the literature. But infused is going to build up more synaptic connections around the brain, and you'll be able to recall in different areas faster, hopefully. That's the idea. Mnemonics, look at mnemonics. And for number 10 is not exactly a tip, but it's something you should be aware of, and it's called linguistic determinism. And this is, your world is deterministic by your language and your use of language. They say that when you learn a new language, you think differently, and this is because the use of words is different. If you only started focusing your vocabulary on different breeds of dogs, well then your conscious mind will be drifting more towards that, because that is linguistically all you can recognize in your brain. You don't really know what is outside of that box of association. So your language determines the degree of your ability to think. So make sure you're doing it on a subject that's going to be useful for your future. Take care people, and wait for the next video. Like and subscribe again, and take care. Again, number 1 would be making the material matter, making sure it's something that you're genuinely interested in and something you can maintain high levels of focus because of your interest. 2 will be feedback loops, and making sure that you're committed to daily or weekly tests to actively gauge how much you're actually remembering and adjust accordingly. Number 3 is context dependent memory, so you're getting as close as you can to the real world scenario that you want to be using the language to make sure that it's more effective to be using it. Number 4 will be open-ended questions to try and put yourself in a position of continually learning with questions and receiving answers from others rather than the opposite way around. 5 is forgetting grammar completely and concentrating on the spoken language, or forgetting the spoken language and only focusing on non-verbal communication, as it's the highest form of communication out of everything, or the highest percentage form of communication. Number 7, high frequency words and verbs, is selecting the most important words, 2,000 most important words to get 80% of language. Number 8 is incognate words, which is the bleed of different languages where they're spelt the exact same but pronounced differently. Number 9 is in pictographic association and combining dual coding with words, written words and pictures. And then number 10 is in linguistic determinism, and again that is in your use of language and how it determines your reality.